Balloonerism, probably the last project we're ever going to get from Mac Miller, just dropped on Friday. That's kind of an emotional thing to acknowledge that and say that, but it's also a good thing, something that Mac Miller's estate has done, which every fan of Mac Miller can agree with, has done a fantastic job preserving his image and his legacy by not oversaturating it with projects that he never actually intended to come out. So Balloonerism being the last one of those is kind of a big deal. And I'm not going to lie, this is something that I had mixed feelings about when I first heard that Balloonerism was going to end up coming out. So I'm going to preface this. I love Mac Miller. He is my favorite artist. I mean, from the High Life all the way to Circles, all of Mac's albums are iconic in their own way and all have a different impactful effect on my life, and I'm sure a lot of y'all watching as well. So when they first announced Balloonerism, like I said, I had mixed emotions, especially given what I knew about the album prior to its release. I knew that it was from the Sanctuary era, which for any of y'all that know Mac Miller know that this is his darkest time. It's where his substance abuse was at its peak. And it also kind of proved as a shift in Mac Miller's dynamic, both musically and also like the people he surrounded himself with. So this album was recorded alongside Faces during the Sanctuary era, but it ended up becoming its own project and having its own identity. And I think after listening to both projects separately, it's pretty clear that Balloonerism had become its own separate theme, musical style, and everything. So rightfully so, it was its own project. We also know it wasn't originally released because of its darker themes and the fact that Good AM kind of took precedent as labels were putting pressure on him to keep moving on with his career. So for better or for worse, the album was kind of put on the back burner and stashed away until last Friday. So that gives us what is probably the last project we can kind of dive into about Mac Miller. The Sanctuary era of Mac is probably the hardest era to listen to for me personally, given how everything ended. I mean, extreme drug use, self-isolation, and death square in the face, which, you know, for any passive listener, it's not going to be like an easy thing to listen to, nor is it something that you just kind of put on when you're in a happy-go-lucky mood. But it does obviously serve a purpose, and it's really fucking good. And it's really helped shape what Mac becomes as an artist because of it. Something that everyone knows about this album is previous versions have flooded the internet for years. I actually listened to an early version myself, probably around like 2019, soon after he'd passed, because I actually wasn't really that aware of it. So there were several versions that kind of floated around. I gave it a listen, but it's never something I really thought of again. It was incredibly dark. The version that I listened to was not very well polished. Obviously, you know, the album wasn't an official release. It was a leak. I felt bad listening to a leak, especially after his passing. So I just kind of let it be. I was just curious, had to give it a listen, but nothing was worth, you know, diving back into. So when they announced the official release of Balloonerism, I was excited to see what it was going to be. I knew it was going to be more polished than that previous version, but it didn't lead me to, you know, go buy the $150 box set that they released, which I'm now regretting come actually listening to the album. I realized I made a mistake not doing it. Even though $150 is fucking ridiculous for a box set, I kind of wish that I paid for it. That being said, that is because this album is good. And it's nothing like any of the leaked versions I'd ever listened to. So every preconceived notion I had about this went out the window. And I made sure to go into this album with that mindset. I mean, with Mac being such a big artist in my life, there was no question that I was going to go into this with an open mind and be ready for whatever was coming, right? I think the release of $5 Pony Ride prior to this did start to get me excited the week before. I had no idea what this song was going to be like. And then it's a jazzy, fun singing song that at this point in Mac's career, Mac had never really sang a song. Now, it's not the most, you know, polished, well thought out, great version of Mac singing that we get, you know, on Circles and some on Swimming, but it's him having fun with it. He's doing it, you know, he's taking that step, and it just kind of goes to show like how much that just true roots of jazz had on Mac's career and his musical influence. And I think it's so much fun. And I was like, holy shit, this actually might be really good. But I was making sure not to get too far ahead of myself because, you know, there's still a lot of stuff on this album. Now, besides the release of $5 Pony Ride, the only other taste we had of this album was DJ's Chord Organ that was used in the teaser trailers that came out at Camp Flog Gnaw. This album was very polished given the griminess that ensued on Faces, in my opinion. So you can really tell that it still keeps those dark and twisted themes that we talk about on Faces, but it's very different from Faces. So you can see how they're made alongside each other, especially when you think about Stoned versus Angel Dust. To me, those songs are so similar. I imagine they made them, you know, days, if not hours apart from one another, but they are still very different in the musicality of them and the overall vibe and tone of the song. So it makes sense how Balloonerism kind of developed and became its own project. alongside Faces. It's very polished because Faces is so grimy and it's something that people love about the album, but that did not really carry over to this album, which I thought was a breath of fresh air given what I had thought this album could be. And when it comes to themes, I mean, obviously there's going to be overlap with Faces, right? It's the same era. So he's facing death in the face. He's talking about heavy drug use. And then he kind of goes a little bit further where he's talking about reflecting on childhood innocence before the world, kind of corrupts everyone and makes them who they are as an adult, which is something Mac reflects a lot on in 2009 and talks about, later on in his career. And we see it happen to him as well from, the smiling kid in the high life and kids era all the way to the sanctuary era through the last renaissance of Good AM and all the way into Swimming in Circles. So you really see it. And it's just kind of a full circle moment for both Mac's career and life as a whole, what all these things kind of tie into each other and how they can really, there's overlapping themes both in life and death. And, it's this honest reflection and genuine curiosity that I think is what fans, myself included, love about Mac. It's that pure vulnerableness that he has, that he doesn't shy away from the hard questions and he faces it head on. And that's why when you give it a first listen, when I was probably 16, 17, when this was coming out, it's hard to even acknowledge it then. So him being 22 at the time, somewhere around that, just full on facing it head on and almost accepting it is both incredibly brave and new for a lot of listeners that were not really, poignant to this type of lyricism and topic of subject in song. If we didn't have this, staring death in the face type mortality mindset, then you wouldn't have the wake up call renaissance that we have with Good AM that turns into what I think his most insightful and thought provoking pieces, Swimming and Circles. So to any Mac fan, you can appreciate songs like Funny Papers, where it kind of serves as a 2009 kind of magnum opus of this album, where he's talking about death, no one dying on Friday, his kind of eyes being open to everything, to then going full circle to talking about the beauty of life and new life and the joy that brings on this beautiful chord progression on the piano. I think it really set the stage for what my favorite album, Swimming, turned into. It's kind of like the precursor to that. And I think it's just incredible to kind of see that full circle moment with everything. And, while we get the main event of Funny Papers, which I think is kind of the highlight and everyone's biggest takeaway from this album, you still get very full, complete Mac album where you get a little bit of everything. You even get the Delusional Thomas, which for me, if you listen to the Delusional Thomas mixtape, it's his most fucked up work, in my opinion. But that was the point of it, obviously. And it's just, it's something you listen to if you want to just really understand everything he was going through and what was coming out at that time. But it's also, it's not like a super fun listen, but it serves a purpose. And it's, a little alter ego that fueled Mac and helped, make albums like Balloonerism. So it's great. And it's just fun to see that incorporated a little bit more throughout his work as, the rest of his mixtapes are coming onto streaming services and more people are getting aware of his full depth of work, whether they actually really dive into it or not. So yeah, I mean, all that being said, this album surprised me. I did not think this album would influence me as much as it has. It's been 3 days. I know I'm getting ahead of myself. By the time this comes out, it'll probably been a week. But I think knowing what we know now and having the music that we have now from his later pieces really go to show that he was planting seeds the whole time. The precursors were there, and Balloonerism is really one of them. And I think it really shows that in his development and his becoming of who he was as an artist, he really wanted to pursue this stuff early, but wasn't ready to put it out and waited to grow as an artist, make a more polished version to give us Swimming and Circles. Even though obviously Circles was posthumously released, we all know that there was a lot of influence on that album as well from Mac. So I think that this album, more so than Faces, shapes what Mac becomes later on in life, which I think is great. I think it's really cool that we got to see this alongside, the weird little animated film that came along with this. If you watch that on Prime, I think it also helps kind of shape the theme of the album with going from childhood innocence to getting corrupted by the world to ultimately death. And it's just a really kind of great window into who Mac Miller was in this time. I did not think this album was going to do what it did for me. And I look forward to spamming the absolute shit out of it for the next forever and really enjoying this kind of raw, unfiltered era that was Mac Miller during the Sanctuary era. Let me know what you think about this album. Let me know what your favorite Mac Miller album is in the comments below, and check out where I go and rank his songs from Swimming, which is my favorite album. It was something that I took a lot of thought and time into to make sure I went about it the right way. And yeah, I hope to see you guys on the next one. Peace.